Time with me this morning. I realize it is 8:35 and we are the first session, so I appreciate seeing each of you here today and hope to share some thoughts that will be helpful for you as we talk about change and we talk about how conflict kind of intertwines with change. Um, but to get started this early, I had a thought, and I wonder if you've ever gone to a really fancy restaurant. A lot of times what you see or what you get is you order your meal, and as you're waiting for your meal, the the chef or whoever it is comes out and they bring an amuse bouche. And that amuse bouche is something to get your taste buds pumping, to get you engaged in the meal that you're about to have, to get you ready for it. So as I was thinking about this presentation, I was trying to think of what can I give you to get your blood pumping, to get your mind orientated towards our our topic here today, which is embracing change, understanding conflict maybe in a different way, and giving you some actionable items to take home, to take back to class with you, to take into your teams, to become better leaders, and also to be better followers at times. So this is a quote that I found, which I think will be helpful to us as we start to think about the topic that we're going to have over the next hour here, a little bit less. Elliot Yee says you're either moving forward, backward, or you're on the hamster wheel. Be mindful of where your energy is put to use. Now, I love this quote because when we're thinking about change or we're thinking about conflict, some people view change as, it's moving forward. It's advancing, it's prospering, it's creating something new, moving away from the status quo, creating something new. Other people look at change and they'd rather stay in that status quo, or they look see the change that's coming and they look at it as a negative. And whether we're talking about change or we're talking about conflict, we can look at stages of change and stages as in conflict as, are you moving forward? Are you doing something that's going to advance the conversation, advance the ball, advance your agenda, your mission? Is Are you moving backwards? You feel like you're not being heard, you're not being listened to, you feel like you're alone. Or are you just someone who says, "Yeah, I like the status quo. I just want to keep spinning this wheel the way it is. Why do we have to go backwards and why do we have to go forwards? If it's not broke, don't fix it." So, what I want you to do here, and this is kind of your one test. I think Brian in the last session said, ask questions or don't ask questions. It's up to each. Ask questions whenever you want to ask questions. I'm happy to field questions as they come up. But this is your one test from me to you, and I was trying to find a visual besides this quote to kind of illustrate all of these concepts all at once. And I looked far and wide. I looked for a long time, and this is what I came up with. So I hope you enjoy this quote or this little clip. But as you watch this clip, see what we find as far as moving forwards, as far as moving backwards, and the hamster wheel. See if you could identify each of them in this clip. It's a little clip from Seinfeld. I hope as you see that clip, you could see how as George is trying to, end a relationship, his girlfriend at the time doesn't want the relationship to end. She wants to keep the status quo. They end in that last little clip there with the apple. You see that George is moving backwards and his girlfriend is trying to keep the status quo, but meanwhile he thought he had ended the relationship already and was moving forward. In order to understand and to embrace change, we need to plug into the right ports and know how to address different issues in a new way. And the way I look at this is if we could give the visual of a battery. A battery, this 9-volt battery here, it has a positive and a negative port. And in order for the battery to work, we need to plug into the battery the proper way. If we don't plug into the battery the proper way, well, what ends up happening? The battery gets hot, it overheats, it brings a negative charge to the battery as it tries to compensate to make it run efficiently. Eventually, certain batteries might explode. We see that same kind of concept when it comes to change and when it comes to teams and when it comes to conflict. If we don't know how to address change, if we don't know how to address conflict, if we're plugging into the wrong ports, we see teams that are not efficient, that don't work well, that miscommunicate, that are like two ships, sailing away from each other in the night. We see George and his girlfriend who have totally different concepts of what it means for their relationship. So when the battery is plugged in properly, we see something that works, that energizes, that powers up a team, powers up a light, powers up a flashlight, and does not overheat. Another visual I want you to think about as we think about these concepts of change and conflict and this positive, negative kind of dimension of change and conflict, we could think about a fire. When we think about a fire can be positive. It could warm you, it could heat you, it provides light. You could cook with a fire, it molds certain things. Without a fire, swords, all different things we could do with fire. But fire can lead to also growth. Sometimes although we feel for California and what happened there with their fires, sometimes people intentionally start fires in a forest in order for there to be growth that happens. But like California and certain fires, we also we'll also see negative components, which we'll talk about in the next slide. With change and conflict, though, before we get to the negative, we have to talk about the positive. A fire can bring you closer. A fire can create teams. Through adversity, teams can get stronger. A fire, conflict and change can open your eyes. It could lead to new fulfillment, new roles, new goals. It could also be negative, though, like we were talking about. A negative fire, it could burn. It could be uncontrollable. If you add oxygen to a fire, it could be bad because it will spread. It will end up destroying what you were trying to control. The same thing, again, goes with change and conflict. With change and conflict can be negative. A lot of times people could take change or conflict very personally. It could affect emotions and be very emotional. People have an emotional reaction to change. Sometimes we look at change and conflict and we think it's just better to avoid the situation. It's better to separate ourselves from it. And by doing that, at times separation is not a very good answer because you're not dealing with the mental side of change or conflict. You're not dealing with the emotional side of conflict. You're just separating yourself from it. And all of that does is try to cool down the situation, but it doesn't fix the situation itself. Change or conflict in the negative realm it could lead to bad attitudes. There's a quote by John Maxwell, I think it was John Maxwell. He says that a positive attitude is contagious, but a negative attitude can destroy a team and is far more contagious across a team than any positive attitude ever could be. One negative attitude, if you don't weed it out, can destroy your organization and destroy your team. So when we're talking about change and conflict, we have to worry about both the positive and the negative side, because we don't want on the negative side, we don't want our team to be riddled with a disease or a cancer that's going to spread throughout it and ruin the team concept that we've been trying so hard to build. Now, what I'd like to do now is kind of, we've talked about this from kind of a 5,000 foot level of what is conflict, what is change, what's the relationship together, positive, negative. Let's dive into, let's lower our view a little bit and dive into when we have negative change or negative conflict that's going on within our organization. What are some skills we can use in order to move forward so we don't lead to personality conflicts, emotional conflicts? We don't just avoid the situation. We don't let a bad attitude infect our team. We don't let the cancer spread and destroy what we've built. Let's lower our view a little bit and see what are some actionable items we can use in order to, if we see this start to happen, what can we do? What can we do as leaders? What can we do as administrators, as faculty? What can we do to try to head this off? Well, the first thing I want to talk to you about is a lot of times with change, the reason why we have a negative response to it or a negative reaction to it is because people are confused. People don't see the big picture or the goal of what the positive aspect of this change can be. When people don't understand the big picture or the goal, they will choose the status quo. They will look at the change in a negative light. They will not want to take on extra work, or not even extra work sometimes, just different work. And different work can be something like when we saw with the positive slide, different work can be something that leads to fulfillment. Different work can lead to growth, but people will be resistant to that fulfillment and that growth if they don't see the big picture or the goal. They're confused. They're disoriented. They understand what the status quo is, but the devil you don't know is viewed a lot of times as worse than the devil you do know. I already know what I have to do. I show up each day, I go through my motions, and I know what I'm supposed to do. But this change, it's the unknown. What do you mean you want me to do these different tasks now? What do you mean we're going this direction now? I thought we were I thought we were building to stay right where we're at. But like that first slide, staying where you're at is you're just a hamster in the wheel. And if you're just a hamster in the wheel, there's another quote that says, really, there's only moving forward or moving backwards. There really is no status quo, because the status quo of you spinning that wheel, that means you're never growing. You're never getting new fulfillment. You're getting stagnant. You're getting bored. That hamster who just runs in that wheel every day is getting bored. They're getting complacent. They're not expanding their knowledge. They're not seeing new fulfillment in what they could learn through change. Their mind is closed to new opportunities that could lead to growth. So when we are running into this first reaction of confusion, the response to that is, how can we as leaders provide more clarity? The opposite of confusion is clarity. How can we explain the mission better? How can we explain the big picture better? How can we explain where we are going in a new way? How can we explain the differences, the improvements that will result from this? A lot of times we roll out change. We just throw it on the people that we are expecting to change, and we say, this is what we're doing. Like it, support it. And the people who get that, they never know the big picture or reason why. They're just like, well, I guess I'm going this direction now. Nobody really asked me. Nobody looked for my feedback, but now we're going that direction. That's going to lead to a lot of confusion. And the only response you could have at that moment for confusion is clarity. Sometimes as leaders, we need to take a step back. And although, you could look at that box with the big picture status goals, we might have the best intentions in mind. We might have the greatest plan that has ever been created. We might be bringing about the most positive change there is. And people are resistant to it because they don't know where we're going with it. They're confused. At times, as leaders, we need to take a step back and we need to think about maybe their confusion is a result from our leadership. And it's got less to do with the change and it's got more to do with the explanation. If we would just take a moment to explain the big picture, the goal, the improvements, we would eliminate the confusion through clarity. I love this little visual. I like to give you something to think about and then provide you with a visual that maybe will stick in your mind of how we could remember these different concepts. Throughout the slides, I hope to give you kind of something to think about and then a visual that will stick with you. But here we see that both confusion and conflict are kind of on this road together. And as they travel down this road, if we could just get to clarity, eventually that confusion, that conflict move away. We move forward towards clarity and we leave confusion and conflict in the past. So hopefully that helps eliminate a little bit what I'm talking about here. Our next situation here is sometimes with change, we feel alone and we feel afraid. This is not, it's not confusion. At times we feel alone and afraid. And when you see a teammate be kind of fill this gap, how do we help them to embrace change? Well, this is a different response. This requires a different response than clarity. Alone and afraid requires active listening. Now, active listening is a skill that anyone can master. There's certain things that we can do to master active listening, and the training for it is pretty quick. Now, it takes a little bit of effort on the listener's part because it's not our typical response these days. And when I say response intentionally, because a lot of times when we're listening to someone who feels alone and afraid, we are already thinking about our response. We're already thinking about, well, how can we make this person feel better? What can I say to make this person not feel alone and afraid? And oftentimes with active listening, what we really need to think about is, can we get comfortable in silence? Someone who feels alone and afraid is not necessarily looking for you to give them words to make them feel better. They're looking for you to be present. They're looking for you to be silent, to sit with them in their fear. Now, a tactic of active listening a lot of times is if you are able to break that silence. A lot of times you only break the silence when you need to move the conversation along. You try to help the person give more to you so you understand the situation better, so you understand what they're feeling better, you understand their fear better. But one of the ways when you do break the silence, you would echo words that they have said back to them so they know they're not alone. Imagine if someone says, I am super frustrated by this. I can't believe you're bringing down this change. Like, you have no idea what this is going to do to my family. Here, through active listening, if I was to repeat the words back to that person, all of a sudden they start to feel heard. They start to know that you were present in the moment. You allowed them to speak. There was a judge who told me one time, he said, "When I am silent, people speak." And I thought that was pretty compelling because here's a judge in a courtroom who could dominate his will in the courtroom. He could tell people, if you say another word, I'm going to hold you in contempt. I'm going to throw you in jail. And yet he says, I have to take a step back at times. And in my silence, I could hear someone speak, but they're not going to speak unless I stop talking. If I keep talking, they're going to be silent. And that is not the answer in certain situations. Active listening, by echoing words, by being present, by being silent, and also this last component of looking for common ground, by being silent and hearing the story that the other person is saying, you might look at their situation from their side in a whole new way, where now you're able to find common ground between the two of you and echo that common ground back. Oh, I'm afraid about this too. I felt alone at first too. And then I started thinking, and you enter the conversation by echoing the words back to them, but also finding common ground that they can relate to. So active listening is the response often when people are presenting to you that they're alone and afraid and they don't want to embrace a change. How can you sit with them and understand their point of view a little bit differently and that emotion that they're showing to you? Maya Angelou, she's got a great quote. I share this in a lot of my presentations. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. If you could change over someone from feeling alone and afraid and move them past that stage, now you've tackled confusion, you've tackled alone and afraid, and now you've opened up that person to a potential change that you're trying to make. You've shown them why it's in their best interest. You've met them on common ground, and you've brought them back to the team in a way. All right, well, it doesn't end there, though. At times, people aren't showing you that they're confused. They understand exactly what the change means. They don't necessarily feel alone and afraid, but instead, like I kind of alluded to earlier, they don't feel heard. That's something different, again, than being confused. That's something different than feeling alone and afraid. It is, you're not, I'm not heard. I didn't have a voice. I feel jilted by what you're doing. The response to feeling not heard is empathy. Now, sometimes we have active listening in stage 2, and we have empathy And those two things are happening at the same time. They need to happen at the same time. Someone feels alone and afraid and not heard at the same time. So while you are implementing your active listening skills, you're also doing that with an empathetic ear. And what the skills are here that you have to master is with empathy, we remove I from the conversation. We walk the talk. What do I mean by walk the talk? Well, instead of walk the walk is more of how can I show someone through example that I want someone to do something. If I'm willing to do it, you should be willing to do it too. That's not what I'm looking for here. Walk the talk is instead of sitting someone down and having a conversation with them, did you ever notice that if you just walk with someone, actually physically walk with someone, the conversation might take a different tone and tenor than if you sat down across a table from them and made it more of a business kind of communication. If you it's a nice day outside, why don't we go for a walk? And instead of spending that however long you're going to spend, half hour, whatever it is that you're going to spend with that person, let's go for a walk. A lot of times when people are walking, the silence is acceptable. We walk next to each other and we don't feel compelled the same way we do when we're sitting across from someone at a table to fill the silence. A lot of times when we're walking, you might have your hands in your pocket. Your stroll might feel more relaxed than if you're sitting across the table, sweat on the brow. You're like, oh my God, we got to get this change brought forward. But the walk is like, all right, well, let me walk in your shoes here for a minute. Let me hear what you have to tell me. Let's be okay in the silence. Let me take me out of this and just walk with you as a friend. Let me help you release your poison that you feel inside of you, and we could do it slowly. There's no set point that we have to walk to before we turn around. Did you ever notice that? If you just start walking, all of a sudden you realize, boy, we're a long way from where we started, and somehow we got to make it back. Oftentimes when you're sitting across the table from someone, you're like, oh, half hour's up. I got another meeting. Your time is up. That's the opposite of empathy. That's putting them on a schedule. But with a walk, you're like, oh man, well, holy cow, I didn't realize we were walking for 45 minutes. We got 45 minutes back. What are we going to talk about? With empathy, we are now building a different sort of connection where that person feels heard. We put our heart first with empathy before we tackle mental and emotional kind of issues. There's this great example. Native American culture, a lot of times with their flywheel, Native Americans, when there was conflict or change that affected the group, rather than tackle the physical component, the emotional component, separate each other from the group, they put a bullseye right in the middle of this wheel, and they tackled the heart first, because they knew if they could just hit that bullseye and hit the person in the heart, the conflict and the change would become positive. It would change the entire culture. It would change the dynamic. It would change the relationship between the person. If someone feels like you have their heart in mind, we're not talking here now about I'm not trying to reason with you. I'm not trying to persuade you. Those are mental kind of conditions. Here, I'm trying to get you to understand that I'm willing to walk with you. I'm willing to not only step into your shoes, I am willing to walk in those shoes to understand where you're coming from. It's not about me. I remove I, and I want to understand you. This is not about a response or a reaction. It's not going to work here. When someone doesn't feel heard, they're not looking for a response or a reaction. They're looking for someone to walk the talk, to walk the talk. And again, like I said, a lot of times these will overlap with the last stage of active listening. In order to empathize with someone's experience, you must be willing to believe them as they see it and not how you imagine their experience to be. Some of you have heard presentations that I've given before. I've given this little story. So you might have heard it before, but I like to tell it because I think it's so true. When St. Ignatius used to go to other civilizations to spread the call with his missionaries, the missionaries a lot of times would want to go into those places and they'd immediately want to start preaching. I think we all like to teach. That's why we're in this profession. We like to teach. But what St. Ignatius would say is, before you ever think about preaching to the people that we've just met, first you have to walk with them. You have to walk with the most marginalized in that community to understand. Only then should you preach. And what he said, he followed that up by saying, if you don't do that, if you don't walk the talk, all you could offer are platitudes and outrage. Platitudes and outrage from your own perspective. Platitudes, what you think are good, and outrage, what you think is bad. You can never offer someone true consolation. You're never going to hit their heart. Your preaching is never going to resonate with them because they know you don't understand them. They're never going to feel heard because you've never spent the time to listen and let them feel heard. That is the key to this third stage. It's a different response. It might build into alone and afraid with active listening, but when someone doesn't feel heard, the answer needs to be empathy. All right, fourth stage. This is our final stage. You could feel alone and afraid. You could feel not heard. There's a different dynamic when someone feels not understood. That's different than not heard. I could through empathy, I could let you feel heard, and at times you could still feel not understood. What is the key to not feeling understood? Some of you may have heard this term before. I think it's pretty fascinating when you look at some of the research on affect labeling that occurs. What affect labeling is rather, when we talked about active listening, we talked about echoing the person's words back to them. Affect labeling is a little bit different. Rather than reflecting the person's own words back to them, you label their emotions that they're sharing with you, and you reflect those emotions. You label those emotions back to them. So if someone might not say that they're angry, someone might not say that in so many words that they're frustrated, that if they did, you could echo that word. You're angry, you're frustrated. But if they don't particularly say those words, you might still say, it sounds like you're angry. It sounds like you're frustrated. The key to affect labeling through echoing emotions is that we lower the cliff that they are going to jump off of. And what I mean by that is, if you look at conflict, true conflict, negative conflict, as someone is telling their conflict story, their emotions are on the rise. You could see it in their body language. They got veins popping out of their neck, their face is red, their speech it quickens. You've got situations where their fists are clenched. They won't look you in the eye. They're crying. As they're telling their conflict story, their emotions are going up and up and up and up. Studies show that if you are able, as they're on this rise, if you're able to intercept this rise, it's the picture in my mind is almost like I was watching Top Gun Maverick the other night. My wife always says, "What are you watching that movie? You watched that like 25 times." I'm like, "Well, it's always on." So I turned Top Gun Maverick on, and what you see is you got these fighter pilots, and when they're in this dogfight, you got the fighter pilot, and they shoot the anti-missile little things off the back, and it intercepts the missile, so the plane doesn't get hit. That's the visual I want for you with affect labeling. Is here we are. This person is on the rise, and if we could shoot these anti-missiles, it starts the decline a whole lot faster. The studies have shown that if you could reach into and echo the emotion, label the emotion that someone is feeling as they're on this rise, you start the downturn that much faster. Sometimes some studies have shown up to 18 minutes, because even after the person stops telling their story, their emotions are still worked up. They still feel it. You could shorten that rise up to 18 minutes after they got done telling their story. Imagine if you intercept the missile on the rise and bring them back down. You lower the cliff, you bring them back to the situation here, and you help resolve the issue. You help them embrace the change in a quicker, more peaceful manner. There are also studies that show when we get very emotionally connected to something, and I'm not a brain expert, but I think, again, this is fascinating stuff. What takes over in your brain is your amygdala, your fear receptor in your brain, and it just goes on overdrive. It's going on overdrive, and your prefrontal cortex, which is reason and kind of thinking through things and rational thought, that goes into the background. So your amygdala is firing, and your prefrontal cortex is off in the distance. What studies have shown is that this often happens with children, because children are trying to figure out the world. And when they are embraced with change and new things that they've never learned how to deal with yet, you have the amygdala that is just firing and firing and firing, because they're fearful, they're unsure, they don't know how to respond. But if even with children, if you are able to label their emotion, you feel fearful right now, you feel frustrated, and you label their emotion, even though they can't verbalize it because they don't know what to do with it yet, you lower the temperature with the child. And now all of a sudden, their amygdala stops firing as much, because you're giving them, their prefrontal cortex, something to latch onto and make sense of something they've never had to deal with before. This change that they are confronted with. You're giving their brain something to latch onto rather than fear. What I submit to you is that the same thing happens with adults. When we are confronted with something that we don't know, that is unsure, that we haven't had to deal with before, our amygdala starts to fire and fire and fire. The only way to get this to stop, and stop in a quicker manner, is to affect label. And now we give the brain something else to latch on to in the prefrontal cortex to say, all right, now I know what to do with this. Now I know that I'm heard. Now I know that I'm understood. Now I'm not as confused. Now I don't feel as alone and afraid. We identify the interest and the emotion that is causing this amygdala to fire, and we intercept it. And by intercepting it, we're able to embrace change and move forward in a different way. This is Cheryl Richardson. People start to heal the moment they feel heard. You have that power in you to help people start the healing process. Those 4 stages, these 4 stages, as we look at this is just a summary slide of the 4 stages we've covered. But if we could master these 4 stages, confusion, alone and afraid, not heard, not understand, and like the battery, if we could plug into the right port and see, identify, what is it that we are being confronted with? All change and all conflict doesn't require the same response. It doesn't require, well, just get it done. It requires a direct plug-in to a particular port that we are being addressed with. And if we plug into that port, you could see the value in how you respond to someone who is not embracing change in a whole new light. Confusion leads to a certain response. That's clarity. Alone and afraid leads to a certain response. That's active listening. Not feeling heard leads to a certain response. That's empathy. Not feeling understood, affect labeling. Master those, and now you've got a team that isn't getting destroyed. It's not getting burned from within. Now you're starting to embrace change in a positive light. I've created, if that last summary slide, oh my God, Murray, I mean, this is like, you're blowing my mind here. There's no way I'm going to remember this. I've tried to create a conflict resolution idea that you can use, that you could take with you, that's memorable. I call it my stop, drop, and roll method. And this stop, drop, and roll, if you remember back in the day when we had Smokey the Bear and you get caught on fire, some people want to run, some people in the run and you get more oxygen in the fire and now the person is really in trouble. Here, what we were always told is, when you're caught on fire, you stop, drop, and roll. I encourage you to use this when you are dealing with change, when you're dealing with conflict. Can you, within what I just kind of mentioned in these prior slides, can you build a stop, drop, and roll method where you stop, you stop. In the stop stage, you're dealing with the mental component of the conflict or the change. You're dealing with clarity and active listening as your approach to dealing with someone who is confused, alone, and afraid. Stopping means you stop what you're doing. You are willing to be present in the moment. You're willing to actively listen to that person. The drop stage is someone doesn't feel heard. And what I mean by drop is you are physically willing to drop yourself, to lower yourself. You're not preaching to them from the pedestal. You're not the missionary who just wants to preach. You are lowering yourself through active listening again and through empathy to understand the problem or the resistance to change from that person's perspective, not from yours. But dropping it requires a bit of humbleness. It requires a bit of patience. It requires a leader who is willing to meet the person on their level or below so you can understand where they're coming from. The roll stage. At some point, we need to take action. someone feels not understood, but we still need to kind of move forward. How can we now take some sort of proactive measure to address what this person is feeling? The role stage is affect listening is actually a proactive measure. It's not, I'm willing to be silent. It is, I am going to echo an emotion like a sniper, like that missile defense system. I am going to implement that to try to bring you back. So the roll stages, when I'm on fire, I'm not going to just stop and drop and sit there on fire. I'm going to roll to put this thing out. Your role is to attack the heart and mind through physiology, amygdala, prefrontal cortex, through affect labeling, through identifying the interest that the person is showing to you. I don't know if any of you have ever seen this picture of Banksy, but this is a popular street artist who goes around different areas, and all of a sudden he's got a piece of street art that pops up. This is one of his most famous kind of iconic images. And here, what I love about this picture is that you never know here, did the girl just release the heart balloon? Is she chasing after the heart balloon and she's just about to catch it? But for you, the reason why I bring this picture to light is because I hope that through these efforts, you're moving closer to the heart balloon. The heart balloon is in a conflict and a change. You're not letting the heart balloon float farther away from you. If anything, you could keep this picture in your mind and you could ask yourself, if somebody is resistant to embracing change, am I letting the heart balloon move farther away from me? Or am I taking these efforts, whether it's stop, drop, and roll or the other efforts, am I taking these efforts to try to reach out and bring that heart balloon closer to me? As I was preparing for this presentation, my wife kind of looked over my shoulder, and apparently there's this children's book. It's called The Egg, the Carrot, and the Coffee Bean. And I had never heard of it before, but she told me a little bit about it, and I thought it was pretty interesting and relatable to what we're discussing here today. And what the story is that with the egg, sometimes we have something that is very hard on the outside. It has a shell. And as we put that into boiling water, it goes from being soft on the inside to hard on the inside. With a carrot, it starts out hard on the outside, and then you put it into boiling water, and eventually it softens on the inside. With the coffee bean, you put that into boiling water, and it impacts the water. It changes the water around it. It creates a cup of coffee that people will enjoy in a different way than the water. It benefits and improves the water. When you're dealing with change and with conflict, you have to be careful not to be creating eggs in your organization. Someone who is hard on the outside and through the boiling water, which is the change or the conflict, they're just getting harder and harder on the inside. If you could have attacked them sooner or brought light to them sooner, you still could have got to the soft inside and made a difference and changed the trajectory of the change and the conflict. With the carrot, they started out hard on the outside, and through some efforts, you help soften them a bit. You bring light to them. You change them into something that is a contributing part of the team, but still the carrot is still its own thing. It's still kind of left on the outside. The coffee bean, the ideal of teamwork is that through our actions together, through the boiling water and the benefit of the coffee bean, we could create something that is far better than the two individual parts. How do you go about creating teams, systems, organizations, students, faculty that are part of a team where we're trying to create a coffee, not necessarily just a carrot, and definitely not the hard boiled egg? I'll leave you with one final visual here. And this visual, Michelangelo says that every block of stone has a statue inside of it, and it is the task of the sculptor to discover it. Imagine if that is our, as leaders, that is our perception, and that is our mission, is to, like Michelangelo, take a block of stone and through our efforts help mold that stone into something that is beautiful. Instead of just throwing things at the stone and expecting the stone to change into a statue, we are going to mold that statue into a creation that is amazing, that's timeless. We have that ability. And at times, if we look at it from the other standpoint, we're not always the leader. At times, we are the follower. And when we are the follower, at times we are the one who's getting molded. We're the one who needs to grow. We're the one who needs to benefit from a change. We're the one who could get additional fulfillment. We won't just be the block of stone anymore. At times, we have to be willing to embrace the change, and we might look different after it. We should look different after it. Hopefully, we're going to look better after it. But, the stone as your car, like, I don't know what this block on this slide is going to particularly turn into. Sometimes change is a work in progress. It takes time. It takes, effort. It takes patience. Michelangelo didn't come up to the stone one day and in one chink of the stone, boom, we've got a Roman soldier. Instead, it took effort. It took time. It took patience by not only Michelangelo, it took time and patience by the stone to be molded into something that is far greater than what they were to start. Well, I hope that was helpful to you. I hope that I fulfilled my promise to give you actionable items to kind of lead you through embracing change. Maybe some of these things you've heard before, maybe we looked at it from a different perspective. I hope we did, but I hope it gives you some levels and some things that you could take with you. Stop, drop, and roll some of these different steps that you could take and how we could plug in to these different areas of change and conflict in new ways in order to bring about positive change, positive fulfillment, and positive embracing by people of what we're trying to do so we could all grow together. Happy to answer any questions you have. I'm not sure what, we're almost at the time. So happy to answer any questions you have. See somebody typing. Oh, thank you. Thanks. You're welcome. No questions? I covered it all. I'm breaking a sweat up here. All right. Well, I'm happy to stay after, but I thank you all for coming. And I look forward to seeing you around campus and elsewhere. So thanks for coming.
Thank you, John. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording.